This is TWiT.
Hey, what's going on, everybody? I am Pruitt, and I am the host of Hands On Photography here on TWiT TV. I know you got yourself a fancy smartphone, you got yourself a fancy camera, but your pictures are still lacking. Can't quite figure out what the heck shutter speed means? Watch my show. I got you covered. Want to know more about just the ISO and exposure triangle in general? Yeah, I got you covered. Or if you got all of that down, you want to get into lighting, making things look better by changing the lights around you. I got you covered on that too. So check us out each and every Thursday here on the network. Go to twit.tv/hop and subscribe today.
Before you launch into Journa, may I do my full disclosure?
Yes, please.
Which is that through the auspices of the Town Night Center that I direct at the Craig Newmark Graduate School of Journalism, I have granted money to journa.host for its out-of-pocket expenses.
I saw that money came,
months.
And that was you.
That's me.
Good for you.
Well, the New York Times first said it was the Town Center at Columbia University who has a lot of money, and we don't. We're a public school, and they didn't give any money. We did, but never mind all
Fix that Times. It was CUNY.
They did fix it. It was, it's the Newmark, the Craig Newmark School of Journalism. And also, I just got another grant from someone to carry that on. So,
that's nice.
You didn't know that too.
So you gave them a lot more money than they need. I just wanted to point that out, but okay.
It'll last them maybe a year.
Okay. I run our server with 6,000 people for $385 a month. But okay, that's fine. They have staff, right? They have people.
They've brought people on to do some tasks. Yeah, they've had to. And I think what we're trying to do, he's talked about it publicly. So Adam, I set up a bat signal to people to say, Adam can't keep doing this forever. And so
he was doing it on his own. Is that right?
Yeah. Well, he has 7 now volunteers.
Wow.
And others,
but they're volunteer part-time moderators.
They're absolutely volunteer.
Yeah, they're people who watch the stream and then say, "Oh, we're going to block that."
And more than that, they're approvals and all that.
Yeah.
But we talked to the Poynter Institute, which is probably likely to take it on.
Good. So how many people at Journa host now?
I think he's up to 2,000.
Okay.
Because he said the same thing. He said if he improved everybody who's tried, it'd be like 30,000. I talked to him this afternoon.
No, I'm very careful. We have 6,000 members, all of whom I have individually approved.
Okay. And I quoted you in my latest
spare
post.
time. In my spare time, we don't have any additional moderators.
You, Leo, also said that you were going to now limit it to the club, which I think is very smart.
Yeah. So just for people to understand, first of all, there's a common misunderstanding about Mastodon. The thing that you're joining is the Fediverse, which is much bigger than Mastodon, and it includes PixelFed, it includes Pleroma, it includes PeerTube. There's a lot of other things. Microblog, Manton Reese's microblog. There are a lot of other things, including, by the way, WordPress. And I know you want to talk about it, Jeff, so we'll mention it. Tumblr has said we're going to get on the Fediverse as well. So all of these are part of a group of interconnected social sites that communicate using something called ActivityPub. So what really is the key technology here is ActivityPub, activity streams, that allows individual sites using various software on these sites to communicate, and for you on any one site to follow people on all other sites. So for instance, going forward, I would be able to follow a Tumblr account on my twit.social account. Cool, right? It's not Twitter. It's not designed to be Twitter, but it does have some of the features of a Twitter-like service. So Adam has created his own home on the Fediverse, uses Mastodon software, but it's a Fediverse site for journalists only, and he has to vet everybody, right? Everybody has to provably be with a journalistic organization,
or journalists if they're freelance, they send in, they show
clips
pieces and so on.
How did you? How you could get in, Jeff, though, as a professor of journalism?
Yeah, also I'm on the board, so I think I can get in that way.
You could get in. Okay.
But yeah, I think other professors are on. Jay Rosen's there, I'm pretty sure.
So the key is for any Mastodon site, except for the biggest ones, which are trying to be Twitter, and by the way, that's a little problematic, is to create a local community, because you have a local feed that is somehow connected. In our case, it's all the people, this is the middle thing here, all the people who listen to TWiT. In journa.host to be all the journalists talking amongst each other. That's a great thing. There's a secondary value to journa.host because you can presume if I see an account on journa.host that they're vetted journalists. right?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
That's the idea.
But there is a downside, as I'm sure you.
Well, the downside is any other Fediverse member can block any other. So I block Gab. I block. There's some sites that I don't. If people will start brigading us, this is a very big important part of this. If a site starts brigading us, we just block the whole site from my site, and I don't see them anymore. I can individuals can do this too, by the way. Anybody with an account on the Fediverse can say, I don't want to see anything from that site or from that person.
Yeah.
That can be done as an individual, and I can
Matthew
do that
wrote
as a host. Yeah.
Matthew wrote about somebody who was a little, I think, over the top in blocking because Matthew, you should explain.
Yeah, I think that the one of the sort of problematic aspects is when a server or instance blocks an entire other server or instance, which obviously is one of the things you can do if that instance has a whole bunch of people that you don't like Gab, for example. So a whole bunch of Mastodon instances blocked journa.host, and they had a bunch of different reasons for doing it. Some of them just don't like journalists. There were trying to look at clickbait, tabloid journalists who will collect, search through, and misinterpret anything you say, enabling hate and harassment. Surveillance capitalists was another comment.
There were I seem to remember some problems with some of the people on journa.host.
When he turned it on, he didn't understand what was going on, and he briefly got smashed because he thought that once he turned it on that anybody could come in. So he's, oh my God, and he stopped. That was point one. Point two, he let in a writer from National Review Online,
right?
And that's what pissed off, especially one server in Australia that said, because of that, you're all awful. I'm going to block everyone there.
So that's just bad practice. But anybody who runs a server can do that. And if you are on their server and you don't like that, first of all, they should publish that information. Not all do.
So there were two other aspects, and one I sort of got caught up in because I used a link in my piece in CJR that someone shared that showed how many people blocked journa.host. So that software that shows you how many people block a certain instance was created by Kiwi Farms.
Oh, yeah.
And so,
Adam used that Kiwi Farms tool as well.
Right. So then a bunch of people use that as evidence
Kiwi Farms
that he was clearly a bad person.
Was a kind of a
troll
farm
instance.
Yeah, they're still around.
Yeah.
Most people block Kiwi Farms. And using a Kiwi Farms tool, even though it doesn't by itself have any point of view, was seen by some people on the Fediverse.
Yeah, right.
The thing you have to understand about the Fediverse, first of all, it's kind of like a health food store. It's you're wandering.
An acquired taste? Is that what you're saying?
No, but you're wandering into there was a culture before you all came.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you're wandering into this culture, and this culture was very different than the mass culture. It was not.
You're bringing your hamburgers, damn it.
Yeah. I agree.
There's actually a really good, I'm trying to remember the guy's name now, but he wrote a piece exactly like that, talking about how, this was to be expected, not just the journa.host thing, but just people from Twitter, Twitter refugees showing up, not understanding the culture, behaving in all sorts of ways to try and get their toots to go viral or whatever that they're used to on Twitter. And
we don't like
he made some good points. That people had a thing going on. It's like they're having a basement party with just half a dozen people and they're playing, songs on the mandolin or whatever, and all of a sudden 3,000 frat guys show up with a kegger or whatever.
Store. It's more that's more apt. But at the same time, that happens. Remember when AOL was allowed onto the internet, and it was this
the long September.
The long September.
I just got the book about that, Net Wars.
And in fact, the guy uses that analogy in his piece about Mastodon.
But I have to say, best practices.
Richard Littler, can I just read this real quickly? I think it's what Mathew might have been referring to. People grumbling that Mastodon is slow at the moment. You've just turned up with 1 million people in a tiny rural village, and you're complaining there's a queue to get into the only tea room, which is run by gay pensioners Babs and Maureen as a retirement hobby on Monday through Wednesday. Relax.
Yeah, it was good.
But to its credit, actually the Fediverse has expanded quite well.
Oh, yeah.
And handled this onslaught quite well. I think there's 7 or 8 million new users all of a sudden. And it's
Imagine what Eugen's life has been like since.
Well, Eugen gets a lot more attention than he probably deserves. He wrote a client, which we all use, which you like, they call Mastodon. But there's others. There's Pleroma. There's
By the way, I asked today. Somebody, a Fortune reporter called me before interviewing him, and I said, do me a favor, find out how he pronounces it. Is it Eugen the German way or Eugene? He said, Eugen's right, but I go by, I kind of give up and I take Eugene.
Actually, I always called him Gargron
Eugene.
because that's his Mastodon.
It's easier. Right.
And everybody knows Gargron on Mastodon. Now it's because he's been in Time Magazine. But
I should mention in my story, I mentioned that a guy on Mastodon had mentioned something to me about however many instances blocked journa.host. He reached out to me and said, excuse me, I'm not on Mastodon. I'm on Pleroma.
Yeah.
Which I had never heard of before.
Right. It's a Fediverse. People keep calling it Mastodon. It's not. It's the Fediverse.
No, it's not.
And it's really important to make that distinction.
Yes.
For a variety of reasons. But best practices in the Fediverse is not to block a whole instance unless that whole instance is provably problematic.
Yeah. Yeah.
Remember, as I said, each individual on your server and every other server can block an entire instance if that person doesn't like it, or an individual. They're very good tools. For an instance to block an entire instance is really extreme. I only block about 7 or 8.
It feels like that's kind of the nuclear option.
It's very much so. And so maybe, but again, it's also the privilege of the instance runner. Yeah. It's coming out of our pocket. It's coming out of my time. I'm doing it if I want it. But everybody who is on the instance should know what you're blocking. So,
and in fact, some people I've seen have left that server specifically because it did that.
That's the way they respond to it. That's the way they respond.
Which is your option.
Yeah, exactly.
It's a little bit of a hassle. It's a big hassle, and it's also you lose your toots.
Do you lose it, or does it just stay there with the old URL?
Yeah, it stays there.
It stays there.
It stays there.
And in fact, if people go, because I moved from Mastodon.social to journa.host.
Your stuff's still on Mastodon.
Yeah, so I exported my file list, imported it, and now when people click on the old link, they just see my old profile, and it says I've moved to this.
Oh, so your old posts are there under the old profile. Oh, that's cool. That's good.
The other side of this is I'm sitting here in TWiT Social. I don't see any. There's a lot of other stuff in the Fediverse that I don't see. I only see people I follow. People, that's the home. I'm using the advanced web interface, but this is the same thing. If you click the buttons, I see who's people I follow in home.
Oh, you caught me. I boosted something during the show.
That's fine. I see. That's allowed on Mastodon. I see the local timeline. And by the way, you don't have to follow anybody who's in your instance because you're already can see everything that's going on in your local timeline.
Cool. Yeah.
And then the federated timeline is not everything. So I don't see Gab or I don't see anything. I don't see all the other stuff. I only see people who people on my instance are following. So that's a somewhat self-selecting group if you have a good instance. And then if I do see something coming over the federated timeline, if I see nudity or pornography coming over, I'll block that person. I won't block their instance. But the instance blocking is really if you're getting brigaded. If like 100 people from an instance are coming over to your instance and harassing people.
The thing that interests me partly is in terms of behavior and sort of culture is things like the content warning. So when I first...
That takes a while to get used to. I notice that's going away, though. People aren't using it anymore.
It is going away, and yet people are getting more upset about it as it's going away. I thought it was interesting when someone explained to me, don't think of it as a content warning like it has to be super serious or it's going to trigger someone or whatever. Think of it as a headline.
Yeah, that's what I use it as. Yeah.
Yeah, and so people, once I started thinking about it in that way, then I used it differently. So if someone sees like bird site info as the headline.
Yeah, I don't want to see it.
Maybe they don't want to.
I don't want to see it.
They'll
You know, the
just
best
scroll
use
by.
I've seen of it,
Yeah.
this is going to sound a little trivial. I don't mean it, because the best use is something that truly is triggering or offensive to people. And especially as journalists, we should be kind of aware of that. Though we shouldn't be content warning things about equity and justice, in my view. You know what makes me so sad on Twitter is and Facebook is dead pets.
Yeah, you would want a content
Somebody's
warning.
putting a content warning on the
Yeah.
dead pet, because I really just don't want to be more depressed today. I'm sorry for you. I recognize
But
you.
understand-
but I don't need
Just
to.
as you feel that way about dead pets and bridges, there are people who feel that way about eye contact, which for a long time that was considered to be an appropriate.
Really?
Yeah.
Yep.
So,
Really?
yeah. So I think you're coming into this new community. I think content warning is probably going to go away only because there's so many people who don't do
Yeah.
it. It's kind
Well,
of.
you can turn it off in your.
I as an
tool as
instance
well.
moderator I expand everything because I want to see it.
Yeah, I turned it off.
Right.
And you can
right.
do that, but
you can do.
Yeah.
and I wish everybody used content warning, but I mean all the time for every post, but they don't. So that's fine.
Someone also pointed out that it's easy to think, because we're used to Twitter where it's this kind of monolithic thing. They said you can't assume that
That's right.
just because people on one instance do something or say that this is supposed to be done that way, that's the way everybody in the Fediverse does it, because lots of people have different opinions about
But
those
remember
things.
that Mastodon, particularly, but the Fediverse in general, was originally people were fleeing Twitter because they were they were not safe on Twitter, and so it has a disproportionate number of people who felt unsafe on Twitter, and that's where that whole culture came from.
Yeah, and I had a couple people explain that to me when I was,
No, I noticed nobody's using them
journa.host
anymore. So
Yeah, I see it. It's funny how I see it a lot rarer now.
I also see a lot of people saying, well, we want the quote tweet. We want the quote tweet. We talked about this last week.
I think that would be bad.
I think it's a little rude to come into a place and say, we want it to be more like the old place.
Let me give you a contrarian view of that. And here I'm quoting somebody named Jonathan Flowers, Dr. Jonathan Flowers, who I think has been brilliant on the topic.
I follow him, yeah.
And it's about Black Twitter. And he's explained a lot of things. The first is, we talked about this last week, how quote tweet ended up being used as call and response, and it's a cultural use. And he explains very well how it's used. Then the other thing that happened was he was talking about this, and then Adam Curry came in and said, Flowers said something about white tech bros. And then Adam came in all defensive, as white people tend to do, and said, well, just name some, and this is, no, it's not.
This, by the way, is why I block No Agenda Social. It is one of the few places we don't federate with.
Wow. So it's good to know. So Adam then
if you want to follow No Agenda or Adam Curry, don't come to twit.social. Right. Partly because they were brigading us.
Yeah.
They're the chief source of trolling on all the twit stuff. So
he was doing that. So then he ended up answering Flowers that way. And I said, why don't you listen to people? And what Adam then said was, the same standard was, open your own instance. And I thought Flowers came back with a brilliant response. A brilliant response, which was, that's your way to say F you. That's your way to say go somewhere else. That's your way to say, well, I have the tools and you don't.
Right.
And that's to say, he didn't say it this way, but I will. It's almost saying separate but equal. Okay, if you want to do odd stuff, go off at your own place and do it. Rather than saying, do we value the experience and the mechanisms that people in other cultures are bringing to this? And so it's not just about everybody adapt. Yes, listen, adapt, learn to what's there, but also listen, adapt, and learn to the new value of diversity that's coming in. And this is nothing but society adapting its norms and figuring this out, not doing very well at it. We'll see if we can do it better in Mastodon or not. I don't know. Time will tell.